My name is Norma, and I am 62 years old. For 37 years, I raised my son alone after my husband died, working 2 jobs and sacrificing everything so Brandon could have a better life. I thought we were close. I thought he loved me. But last Saturday, I drove 6 hours to my grandson's birthday party, only to be stopped at the gates and told I wasn't on the guest list. The security guard looked me in the eye and said the party was for close family only. I smiled. I made one phone call, and what happened next left 300 guests in absolute shock. Before I tell you what happened, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you have ever felt undervalued by someone you loved, please hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is one you will not want to miss. Now let me tell you about the phone call that changed everything. Let me take you back to the beginning, so you can understand how I ended up standing outside those iron gates, clutching a birthday present, while my own son pretended I did not exist. My husband David died in a car accident when our son Brandon was only 5 years old. I was 28, living in Columbus, Ohio, with a kindergartner and no idea how I was going to survive. David had been a good man, a loving father, but we had not saved much money. What we did have was a life insurance policy for $250,000. Most people would have spent that money quickly, buying a nice house or a new car, trying to fill the hole that grief leaves behind. But I was terrified. That money was all that stood between us, and poverty between my son having a future and having nothing. So I made a decision. I would work as hard as I needed to for our daily expenses, and I would invest every penny of that insurance money for Brandon's future. I took a job at a pharmacy during the day, working the counter and stocking shelves. At night, after I put Brandon to bed, I worked as a waitress at a diner until 2 in the morning. I slept 4 or 5 hours a night. My body ached constantly, but I kept going because I had a son who needed me. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. Brandon slept in the bedroom, and I slept on a pull-out couch in the living room. I cooked every meal at home, never ate out, bought our clothes at thrift stores. I learned about investing by reading library books and watching financial programs on our old television. Slowly, carefully, I put that insurance money into real estate and index funds. Brandon was a bright child, curious and kind. I have so many memories of those years that still make me smile. Teaching him to ride a bike in the parking lot of our apartment complex, his little face so determined as he pedaled faster and faster until he was flying on his own. Making pancakes together on Saturday mornings, his small hands cracking eggs into the bowl. Reading him bedtime stories every single night, even when I was so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open. He never asked for expensive toys or fancy vacations. He seemed to understand even as a child that we had to be careful with money. When other kids got new bikes or video games, Brandon would tell me he was happy with what he had. He would hug me and say I was the best mum ever. Those words kept me going through the hardest times. I worked those 2 jobs for 15 years. By the time Brandon graduated high school, my investments had grown significantly. The $250,000 had become over $1 million. I could have quit my jobs, bought a nice house, lived comfortably. But I kept working, kept saving because I wanted to make sure Brandon could go to any college he wanted without drowning in debt. He got into a prestigious business school on the East Coast. I was so proud I cried for an hour after we got the acceptance letter. I paid for everything: tuition, room and board books, spending money. I did not want him to work during school. I wanted him to focus on his education, to have the opportunities I never had. Brandon thrived in college. He made Dean's List every semester. He joined clubs, made friends, started to build the life I had always dreamed he would have. And then in his senior year, he met Stephanie. Stephanie came from money, real money. Her family owned a chain of luxury hotels across the East Coast. She was beautiful, polished, sophisticated. Everything I was not. When Brandon first told me about her, I was happy for him. He sounded so excited, so in love. I thought any girl who made my son happy must be wonderful. The first time I met Stephanie and her family was at a restaurant in Manhattan. Brandon had invited me to join them for dinner. I took a bus from Columbus to New York, wearing my nicest dress, which I had bought at a department store clearance sale. I was nervous, but excited to meet the girl my son loved. The restaurant was the kind of place where the menus did not have prices, and the waiters wore white gloves. Stephanie's parents, Vivian and Robert, arrived in a chauffeur-driven car. Vivian wore diamonds that probably cost more than I made in a year. They looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of their shoe. Vivian asked me what I did for a living. I told her I worked at a pharmacy and waited tables. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She said, "How industrious." The way she said it made it clear she thought I was beneath them. Robert barely spoke to me at all. He spent the whole dinner talking to Brandon about business opportunities and asking if he had considered working in the hotel industry after graduation. Stephanie was polite but distant. She called me Mrs. Thompson instead of Norma, even when I asked her to use my first name. She did not ask me any questions about myself. It was like I was invisible. I noticed Brandon acting differently that night. He did not mention that I had put him through school. He did not talk about our life in Columbus or the apartment where he grew up. When Vivian asked where he was from, he said Ohio and quickly changed the subject. I felt something shift in my chest, a small crack forming in my heart. After that dinner, Brandon started calling less often. He used to phone me every Sunday without fail. We would talk for an hour about his classes, his friends, what he had eaten that week. But after he started dating Stephanie, the calls became shorter and less frequent. He was busy, he said. Lots of projects, networking events, things he had to do. They got married a year after graduation. The wedding was at a 5-star hotel in Manhattan. 300 guests, most of whom I did not know. I wore a dress I bought specially for the occasion, spent more than I had ever spent on clothing before, but I still felt out of place among the designer gowns and expensive suits. I sat at a table in the corner with some distant relatives of Brandon's father. Stephanie barely acknowledged me during the reception. She and Brandon were swept up in greeting guests, posing for photos, dancing with important people. I watched my son so handsome in his tuxedo, and I barely recognized him. He seemed like a stranger wearing my child's face. After the wedding, Brandon moved permanently to New York. He took a position at Stephanie's family company. They bought a brownstone in Brooklyn. A year later, they had a son, Tyler. I was so happy to become a grandmother. I imagined babysitting, teaching Tyler, all the things I had taught Brandon being part of his life. But that is not what happened. I saw Tyler maybe 4 or 5 times in person over the next 10 years. Mostly, I saw him through video calls that lasted 10 or 15 minutes, with Brandon always saying they had to go. Someone was at the door. Stephanie needed him for something. Holidays were spent with Stephanie's family. Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. Brandon always had an excuse for why they could not come to Ohio or why I could not come to them. The hotel business was busy during holidays, he said. Tyler had activities commitments. It would be too complicated. I sent birthday presents and Christmas gifts to Tyler every year. Beautiful, thoughtful things I picked out carefully. I never received a thank you call, just a brief text from Brandon saying Tyler loved the gift. The last time I saw Brandon in person was 3 years ago. I took a bus to New York and asked if we could meet for coffee. He agreed, but he seemed rushed when he arrived at the cafe. He had 1 hour, he said. A meeting he could not miss. We sat across from each other, and I looked at my son, this successful, well-dressed man, and I tried to find the little boy I had raised. He talked about his work, about Tyler's school, about a vacation they were planning. He did not ask about my life. He did not ask if I was okay, if I needed anything, if I was happy. When the hour was up, he kissed my cheek and said he had to run. He did not invite me to his home. He did not suggest we do this again soon. He just left, and I sat there with my cold coffee, wondering what I had done wrong. I told myself it was normal. Children grow up and build their own lives. I should be proud that Brandon was successful, that he did not need his mother anymore. But late at night, alone in my small house in Columbus, I would cry into my pillow and wonder why my son seemed ashamed of me. 1 month ago, I was scrolling through social media when I saw a post from Stephanie. It was a beautifully designed invitation, graphic announcing Tyler's 10th birthday party. The event was being held at an exclusive resort in the Hamptons. 300 guests were invited. The post called it the celebration of the year. My heart skipped. Tyler's 10th birthday, a milestone. Surely I would be invited to this. I waited for the invitation to arrive in the mail. I checked every day, but nothing came. A week passed, then 2 weeks. Still nothing. I called Brandon. The phone rang and rang, then went to voicemail. I left a message asking about the party. He did not call back. I texted him. No response. I tried again the next day and the day after that. Finally, after 5 days, he sent a brief text. "Mom, it's a small family thing, very intimate. Maybe next time, for 300 people." I stared at that text message for a long time. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I was not invited to my own grandson's birthday party. Brandon did not want me there. Or more accurately, Stephanie did not want me there, and Brandon was going along with it. I could have let it go. I could have sent a gift in the mail and pretended everything was fine. But something inside me refused to accept this. Tyler was my grandson. I had never gotten to be a real grandmother to him, never gotten to take him to the park, or read him stories, or teach him to bake cookies like I had always imagined. I had missed so much already. I was not going to miss this. But there was something else, something I had never told Brandon, a secret I had kept for his entire adult life. You see, I was not the poor, struggling woman everyone believed me to be. Yes, I had worked 2 jobs for years. Yes, I lived modestly in a small house in Ohio. But that insurance money I had invested so carefully over 30 years through wise investments and careful planning, it had grown into something substantial. I was worth about $2.5 million. I had kept this secret intentionally. I did not want Brandon to grow up entitled or lazy. I wanted him to work hard to build his own success, to understand the value of money. So I kept working. My jobs kept living in my modest house and never told anyone about the money. But last year something happened that I had also never told Brandon about. He came to me well, not directly to me. He called and told me about his new business venture. He had left Stephanie's family company and started his own tech startup. It was risky, he said, but he believed in it. The problem was funding. He needed investors, and the banks had turned him down because he did not have enough collateral. I listened to him explain his business plan over the phone, heard the passion in his voice, the hope, and I made a decision. I called my attorney, Harold Peterson, a man who had been helping me manage my investments for years. I set up an anonymous trust fund and had Harold approach Brandon's company as a silent investor, $300,000, enough to get the startup off the ground. Brandon never knew the money came from me. He thought it was some wealthy investor Harold had found who wanted to remain anonymous. The company did well. It was not making millions yet, but it was growing, becoming successful. Brandon was so proud of what he had built. He thought he had done it all on his own, and now he was throwing a party for 300 people and telling me I was not invited because it was too intimate. The irony was almost funny. Almost. I decided I was going to that party, whether Brandon wanted me there or not. I prepared a gift for Tyler, something special. I found an old photo album in my closet and filled it with pictures. Pictures of David, Tyler's grandfather, who he had never met. Pictures of Brandon as a child. Pictures of our little family before everything changed. I wrote a letter to Tyler telling him about his grandfather, about the kind of man he was, about how much he would have loved Tyler. I told him about his father as a boy, about the time he learned to ride a bike, about the pancakes we made together, about the bedtime stories. I sealed it all in a gift box, wrapped in blue paper with a silver ribbon. Then I got in my old Honda Civic and started the 6-hour drive from Columbus to the Hamptons. On the drive, I had a lot of time to think. I thought about all those mornings I woke up at 5 a.m. to work the early shift at the pharmacy. I thought about all those nights I served coffee and pie to drunk customers at the diner, smiling even when they were rude because I needed the tips. I thought about the holes in my shoes I covered with cardboard because I could not afford new ones. I thought about every sacrifice, every missed opportunity, every choice I made for Brandon. And I thought about the look on Vivian's face at that dinner in Manhattan, how she had looked at me like I was nothing, how Stephanie treated me like an embarrassment, how Brandon had let them. By the time I reached the Hamptons, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The resort was exactly what I expected. Massive iron gates, manicured lawns, luxury cars in the parking area. I pulled my beat-up Honda into a spot next to a gleaming Mercedes and sat there for a moment, gathering my courage. I could see the party through the gates. Enormous white tents set up on the lawn. Hundreds of people in expensive clothes, children running around waiters carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Balloons, flowers, a live band playing. It looked like a wedding, not a child's birthday party. I got out of my car, smoothed down my simple blue dress, and picked up Tyler's present. I walked toward the gate, my heart pounding. This was it. A security guard stood at the entrance, a young man in a black uniform with an earpiece and a clipboard. He looked professional alert. As I approached, he stepped forward with a polite smile. "Good afternoon, ma'am. May I see your invitation?" I smiled back at him, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, I do not have one, but I am family. I am Brandon Thompson's mother, Tyler's grandmother." The guard's smile remained in place, but his eyes shifted to his clipboard. He scanned the list, his finger running down page after page of names. Then he looked up at me, and I could see the apology forming before he even spoke. "I am sorry, ma'am. Your name is not on the guest list." I felt the words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my composure. "There must be a mistake. My grandson Tyler is the birthday boy. I am his grandmother. I drove 6 hours to be here." The guard looked genuinely uncomfortable now. "I understand, ma'am, and I am sorry, but I have very strict instructions. This party is for close family only. No exceptions. Close family only. 300 people was close family, but I was not." I stood there holding Tyler's birthday present and felt something inside me crack wide open. "Close family," I repeated, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. "I am his grandmother. How much closer can family get?" The guard shifted his weight clearly, wishing he was anywhere else. "I am just following orders, ma'am. Perhaps you could call your son. Maybe there has been a misunderstanding." "Right. A misunderstanding." I pulled out my phone and called Brandon's number. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. I could see through the gates, could see Brandon standing by one of the tents, his phone clearly in his pocket, choosing not to answer. "Brandon," I called out, waving my hand. "Brandon," but he was too far away, or he was pretending not to hear me. Stephanie stood beside him in a designer dress that probably cost more than my car. She was laughing at something someone said, looking perfectly content, perfectly happy in her perfect party for her perfect life. The guard touched my arm gently. "Ma'am, I am really sorry, but I cannot let you in without authorization. It is my job." I nodded slowly, feeling tears starting to burn behind my eyes. "I understand. You are just doing your job." I turned and walked back toward my car, my vision blurring. Behind me, I could hear the party continuing, music and laughter and celebration. Everything I was not part of. Everything I was not good enough for. I sat in my car and I cried. Not quietly, not with dignity. I sobbed, my whole body shaking with the force of it. 37 years. 37 years I had given to that boy. I had worked myself to exhaustion. I had given up any chance at love, at a life of my own, at remarrying, at having more children. I had poured every ounce of my energy, my money, my heart into raising him, and this was what I got, locked out of my own grandson's birthday party, because I was not wealthy enough, not sophisticated enough, not good enough to be seen. I looked down at the present in my lap. The photo album I had spent hours putting together, the letter I had written to Tyler, telling him about his heritage, about his grandfather, about the family he came from. Would he ever see it, or would Brandon toss it in the trash the moment I left? Then I thought about the $300,000, the money I had given Brandon through that trust, the money that had saved his company, that had made his current success possible. He had no idea it came from me. He thought he had done it all himself, that he had earned everything through his own hard work and talent. Maybe it was time he learned the truth. Maybe it was time all of them learned the truth. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Harold Peterson's number. Harold was more than my attorney. He was a friend, someone who had known me for 20 years, who understood what I had been through. He answered on the third ring. "Norma, good afternoon. How are you?" My voice was rough from crying, but I kept it steady. "Harold, I need you to do something for me, and I need it done today." There was a pause. Harold knew me well enough to hear the steel in my voice. "Of course. What do you need?" "The $300,000 investment in Brandon's company. The one we made through the trust last year. I want to pull it out, all of it, immediately." Another pause, longer this time. "Norma, are you certain that will cause significant financial distress for the company? It might not survive." "I am aware," I said, looking through the gates at my son, who was now throwing his head back in laughter at something. "Do it." May I ask why the sudden decision? I watched Brandon pat someone on the back, saw Stephanie lean into him, the picture-perfect couple with their picture-perfect life. Because my son needs to learn that actions have consequences. He has built his success on my money while being ashamed of me. It is time he knows the truth. "Understood," Harold said, his voice grave. "I will draft the withdrawal notice immediately. It will be delivered to the company's board of directors within the hour. They will have 72 hours to repay the investment or face legal action." "Thank you, Harold." "Norma," he said carefully, "are you prepared for what comes next, when he finds out who the investor was, when he realizes what you have done?" "Let him find out," I said. "I have been invisible long enough." I hung up and sat back in my seat. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something else, something that felt almost like freedom. I was not doing this to be cruel. I was not doing this for revenge. I was doing this because my son needed to wake up. He needed to understand that you cannot build a life on someone else's sacrifice and then pretend they do not exist. He needed to know where he came from, what he had been given, what he had taken for granted. And maybe, just maybe, he needed to know that his mother was not someone to be ashamed of, that I was strong, that I was capable, that I had my own power. I decided to wait. Harold worked fast. I knew the notice would reach Brandon soon. And when it did, when he saw that his mystery investor was pulling out, when he realized his company was in jeopardy, he would panic. He would call me, and then I would tell him everything. 43 minutes later, I watched through the gates as Brandon pulled his phone from his pocket. He looked at the screen, and I saw his expression change. Confusion first, then concern. He answered the call, stepping away from a group of guests. He pressed his free hand to his other ear, trying to hear over the noise of the party. I watched his face cycle through emotions. Shock, disbelief, panic. He said something to Stephanie, who looked at him with alarm. They both hurried toward the resort building, disappearing inside. My phone rang. Brandon. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. "Mom. Mom, where are you?" His voice was high-strained. "I am outside the gates, Brandon. Where you left me. What you are here. Why did you not tell me you were coming?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of that question. "I did tell you, multiple times. You did not answer your phone." "Mom, listen, there is an emergency. The investor in my company, the one who gave us the initial capital, they just pulled out. $300,000. The entire company is in jeopardy. Our accounts will be frozen. We could lose everything. I need to handle this right now. I cannot talk. I know," I said quietly. "You know, how do you—" "Wait, what do you mean, you know?" I took a deep breath. Because I am the investor, Brandon. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. I could hear his breathing fast and shallow, but no words came. The $300,000 that saved your company last year, I continued, that was my money. I had my attorney set up an anonymous trust. I invested in you because you are my son, and I believed in you. And 20 minutes ago, I instructed him to withdraw that investment. More silence. Then in a voice I barely recognized, "What did you just say?" "You heard me. I am the investor, and I just pulled the money out. But you do not have that kind of money. You work at a pharmacy. I was a pharmacy worker," I corrected. "I also waited tables for 15 years. I saved every penny. I invested the life insurance money from your father wisely. I am worth approximately $2.5 million, Brandon. I have been for quite some time. I just never told you because I wanted you to learn to work hard to build something for yourself." I could hear him breathing, could almost hear his mind racing. "This is not possible. This is insane. You cannot just—" "I can," I said. And I did. "Now I think you should have the security guard let me in. We have things to discuss." I hung up before he could respond. Less than 2 minutes later, the security guard's radio crackled. He listened, then looked at me with wide eyes. He walked over to my car window. "Ma'am, you are cleared to enter. My apologies for the earlier confusion." I got out of the car, picked up Tyler's present, and smoothed down my dress. "You were just doing your job, I understand." He opened the gate for me and I walked through. The party spread out before me, all that wealth and luxury and excess. I walked across the lawn, aware that people were starting to stare at me. A woman in a simple dress, carrying a modestly wrapped present, clearly not part of this crowd. I found the resort building easily enough. Inside, the air conditioning was a shock after the heat outside. A staff member directed me to a private room off the main lobby. I knocked once, then opened the door. Brandon and Stephanie stood in the middle of the room. Brandon's face was pale, his eyes red. Stephanie looked furious, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Mom," Brandon started. "What are you talking about? You do not have that kind of money. This is some kind of mistake." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder I had prepared before I left Columbus. I handed it to Brandon. "These are the investment documents. The trust was managed by Harold Peterson. I have been your silent partner all along." Brandon opened the folder with shaking hands. He scanned the papers, and I watched the color drain from his face completely. Stephanie grabbed the documents from him, her eyes moving rapidly over the pages. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than disdain in her expression. She looked shocked, genuinely shocked. "This cannot be real," she said. "You are just a retail worker." "I was a retail worker," I repeated calmly. "I also worked nights as a waitress. I saved every penny I earned. I invested wisely. I built a comfortable life for myself. But I never told Brandon because I wanted him to learn the value of hard work, not to rely on his mother." Brandon was reading the documents over and over, as if he could make them say something different. "But why did you pull the money out? The company will collapse without it. All my employees, everything we have built." "Sit down, both of you," I said. "We need to talk." They sat. I remained standing. "I drove 6 hours to get here today," I began. "I wanted to wish my grandson happy birthday. I brought him a gift. A photo album filled with pictures of his grandfather, his father as a child, memories of where he came from. But when I arrived, I was turned away at the gate. The security guard told me this party was for close family only." Stephanie opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. 300 guests is close family apparently, but not me. Not the woman who raised Brandon alone after his father died. Not the woman who worked 2 jobs for 15 years so he could go to college. Not the woman who gave him $300,000 to start his company. I was not good enough to be on the guest list. "Mom." Brandon's voice broke. "Do you remember when you were 7 years old?" I asked him. "You wanted a bicycle so badly. All your friends had bikes and you wanted one too. But I could not afford it, not a new one. So I worked extra shifts for 2 months, and I bought you a used bike from a yard sale. I spent hours fixing it up, painting it, making it look as good as new. Do you remember what you said when I gave it to you? Tears were running down Brandon's face now. I said it was the best present I ever got. You hugged me and told me I was the best mom in the world, I continued. You rode that bike everywhere. You were so proud of it. What happened to that boy Brandon? What happened to the son who appreciated what he had, who understood sacrifice, who loved his mother? I still love you, he whispered. Do you, I asked. Because the man I saw today, the man who would not answer my calls, who left me standing outside his son's birthday party, who has barely spoken to me in 3 years, that man does not act like he loves me. That man acts like he is ashamed of me. Stephanie spoke up, her voice defensive. That is not fair. Brandon has been busy building a career, raising a family. Too busy to call his mother. I turned to her. Too busy to let me be part of my grandson's life. Too busy to invite me to holidays. I am not asking for much, Stephanie. I am asking to be treated like family. She had the grace to look away. I turned back to Brandon. I pulled the investment because you need to learn something. You need to understand that everything you have accomplished, was built on more than just your own hard work. It was built on my sacrifice, on my love, on my money. You have taken all of that for granted. You have let your wife and her family treat me like I am beneath you. You have allowed me to become invisible. I am sorry, Brandon sobbed. I am so sorry, Mom. I did not mean, I never wanted. What did you want, Brandon? I asked. Did you want to pretend you came from nothing and made yourself into something? Did you want to erase where you came from? He covered his face with his hands. I just wanted to fit in. Stephanie's family. They have so much. Oh, and I felt like I was not enough. Like I had to prove I belonged in their world. And I thought if they knew about your poor mother from Ohio, I finished. About the apartment we lived in. About the second-hand clothes and the yard sale bicycle, you were embarrassed. Yes, he admitted, his voice muffled. I was embarrassed, and I hate myself for it. The room was silent except for his crying. Stephanie sat frozen, looking at her husband like she was seeing him for the first time. I am not going to apologize for who I am, I said. I am not going to apologize for being a working-class woman who did her best. I raised a good man, or at least I thought I did. But somewhere along the way you forgot that. You forgot that being successful does not mean forgetting where you came from. It does not mean leaving people behind. Brandon looked up at me, his face wet with tears. Please, Mom, please do not let the company fail. I will do anything. I will fix this. I will make it right. I am not doing this to punish you, I said. I am doing this to wake you up. You wanted to be a successful businessman. Prove it. Find another investor. Work harder. But do it honestly, knowing where you came from, knowing what you were given, and most importantly, do it while respecting the people who got you here. I walked to the door, then turned back. I am going to find my grandson now. I am going to give him his birthday present, and I am going to spend some time with him because that is what grandmothers do. Whether you like it or not, whether Stephanie approves or not, I am family. I am Tyler's grandmother, and I am not going to be invisible anymore. I left them there and walked back outside into the sunlight. The party was in full swing. I walked through the crowds of well-dressed guests, many of whom glanced at me curiously. I did not belong here, and we all knew it. But I held my head high and kept walking. I found Tyler near a bouncy castle playing with a group of children his age. He was a beautiful boy. 10 years old, with Brandon's eyes and smile. He was laughing, his face flushed with excitement. Tyler, I called. He turned, looking at me with polite confusion. Yes. I knelt down, so we were at eye level, my knees protesting on the grass. I am your Grandma Norma. We have talked on video calls, but I have always wanted to meet you in person. His eyes widened. Grandma, Dad said you might not be able to make it today. The words stung, but I smiled through it. I would not miss your birthday for anything in the world. I brought you something. I handed him the wrapped present. He took it carefully, his manners clearly well trained. "Should I open it now?" "If you would like to." He sat down on the grass and carefully unwrapped the package, taking care not to tear the paper. When he opened the box and saw the photo album, he looked puzzled. But as he started turning the pages, his expression changed. "Who is this?" he asked, pointing to a photo of David in his army uniform. "That is your grandfather," I said. "Your dad's father. He died before you were born, before your dad was old enough to remember him well, but he was a wonderful man. He was brave and kind, and he loved your dad more than anything." Tyler stared at the photo. "I never knew what he looked like." "Now you do," I said. "And this day," I pointed to another photo, "is your dad when he was about your age. See, you look just like him." Tyler's face lit up. "I do." We sat there together on the grass going through the album. I told him stories about each picture, about the time Brandon learned to ride a bike and crashed into a fence but got right back on, about the Halloween when he dressed as a superhero and refused to take the costume off for a week, about the time he tried to bake me a birthday cake and accidentally used salt instead of sugar. Tyler laughed at every story, his eyes bright with interest. He asked questions, wanted to know more. This was his heritage, his history, and he was hungry for it. "Grandma," he said softly, "why do not I see you more?" The question pierced my heart. "That is complicated, sweetheart. But I want you to know it is not because I do not want to see you. I would love nothing more than to spend time with you." "I would like that too," he said. He threw his arms around my neck and hugged me tight. "Thank you for my present. It is the best one I got." I hugged him back, breathing in the scent of his hair, feeling his small body against mine. This was what I had been missing. This was what mattered. When we pulled apart, I saw people watching us. Stephanie's mother, Vivian, stood near one of the tents, her expression unreadable. Other guests whispered to each other. I did not care. Vivian approached us, her designer heels sinking slightly into the grass. "Norma," she said, her voice cool. "I heard what you did. Quite dramatic, pulling your investment from Brandon's company." I stood up, brushing grass from my dress. "I did what I had to do." "You realize you have embarrassed my daughter in front of all these people," Vivian said. "The whispers have already started. Everyone knows there was some kind of scene." "Your daughter embarrassed herself," I said calmly, "by treating family like they are not good enough. By teaching my grandson that some people matter more than others, based on how much money they have." Vivian's lips pressed into a thin line. "We have worked very hard to build our reputation, our standing in this community. We cannot have what?" I interrupted. "Cannot have a grandmother at her grandson's birthday party. Cannot have someone around who actually worked for a living instead of inheriting everything." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You are being incredibly rude." "No," I said. "I am being honest. There is a difference. Money does not make you better than anyone, Vivian. It just makes you richer. I hope you teach your daughter that lesson before she loses what really matters." I walked away from her, back to where Tyler was still sitting with the album. Brandon had appeared and was standing nearby watching us. His eyes were red, his face pale. "Mom," he said as I approached. "Please, do not go. Can we talk?" "I am not going anywhere," I said. "I came here to celebrate my grandson's birthday, and that is exactly what I'm going to do." For the next hour, I stayed with Tyler. We ate cake together, played games, talked. He introduced me to his friends, as his grandmother proud and happy. Brandon hovered nearby, looking lost and broken. Stephanie kept her distance, but I caught her watching us several times. As the party started to wind down, as guests began to leave, Brandon approached me again. This time Stephanie was with him. "Mom," Brandon said, "I know I have messed up. I know I have hurt you, and I am so sorry. I do not expect you to forgive me right away, but please can we try to fix this? Can we start over?" I looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw the little boy I had raised still there underneath the expensive suit and the successful businessman exterior. I saw the fear in his eyes, the genuine remorse. I do not know if we can start over, I said honestly. Too much has happened, but maybe we can start from here. Maybe we can build something new. Stephanie spoke up, her voice quiet. Mrs. Thompson Norma, I owe you an apology. I have treated you terribly. I made assumptions about you based on superficial things. And I am sorry. I would like to do better. I studied her face. She looked sincere, though. Whether that sincerity would last remained to be seen. Actions matter more than words, Stephanie. Show me you mean it. She nodded. I will. Tyler ran up to us, still clutching his photo album. Dad, did you really crash into a fence on your bike? Brandon laughed, a real laugh for the first time that day. I did. Broke my arm in 2 places. Grandma did not tell me that part, Tyler said accusingly. I did not want to scare you away from bike riding, I said with a smile. As the sun began to set over the Hamptons, as the party ended and guests departed, I sat with my family. It was not perfect. It was not fixed. But it was a beginning. The weeks following Tyler's birthday party were strange and difficult. Brandon called me every single day, sometimes multiple times. At first, I did not always answer. I needed time to process everything that had happened, to decide what I wanted from this relationship going forward. When we did talk, the conversations were awkward, full of long pauses and careful words. Brandon apologized repeatedly. He cried often. He told me things he had never said before, about how he had felt inadequate around Stephanie's family, about how he had convinced himself that distancing from me would make him fit in better, about how ashamed he was of those choices now. I listened. I did not forgive easily or quickly. Forgiveness, I told him, was not something I could just hand over. It had to be earned, rebuilt through consistent action and time. Stephanie called me too, which surprised me. Our first conversation was stilted and uncomfortable. She apologized again for how she had treated me, for the assumptions she had made. She told me that after the party, after all the guests had left, and she and Brandon had talked for hours, she realized how badly she had misjudged me. I grew up with money, she said. I never had to struggle, and I think I equated struggle with failure. I see now how wrong that was, how strong you had to be to raise Brandon alone to build a life for yourself. I am sorry I did not see it before. I accepted her apology cautiously. Time would tell if she meant it. Brandon found a new investor for his company within 3 weeks. He worked frantically, reaching out to everyone he knew, pitching his business plan over and over. This time, he was honest about his background. He talked about being raised by a single mother, about learning the value of hard work from me. He talked about his struggles and his mistakes. The new investor was impressed by his honesty and his determination. The company survived, but Brandon told me it was different now. He appreciated it more. He understood that success was not just about talent or luck, but about the people who supported you along the way. A month after the party, Brandon invited me to New York for dinner, not at a restaurant but at his home. I took the bus, just like I always had, but this time when I arrived, both Brandon and Tyler were waiting outside to greet me. Tyler ran to me and hugged me tight. Grandma, I have been waiting all day for you. Inside the house was beautiful, but felt stiff and formal. Stephanie had clearly decorated it with the help of professionals, but the dining room table was set simply, and Stephanie had cooked dinner herself. It was not fancy or elaborate, just roast chicken and vegetables, but she had made it with her own hands. We sat together as a family and ate. Tyler told me about school, about his friends, about a book he was reading. Brandon asked about my life in Columbus, actually listening to my answers. Stephanie asked if I needed anything, if there was any way they could help me. I do not need help, I said gently. I am financially secure. What I need is to be part of this family, to be included, to know my grandson. You will be, Brandon promised. From now on you will be. Over the following months, things slowly improved. I started visiting New York once a month. Sometimes I stayed at a hotel, sometimes in their guest room. Tyler and I developed our own relationship. I taught him to bake, just like I had taught Brandon. We went to museums together. We sat in the park, and I told him stories about his grandfather, about his father, about our family history. Brandon made an effort to call me every Sunday, just like he used to when he was in college. We talked about real things about life and struggles and hopes. The superficial distance between us began to close. Stephanie gradually warmed to me. I think she realized I was not a threat, that I was not trying to take anything from her. I was just trying to be a grandmother. One afternoon, she and I went for coffee alone, just the two of us. We talked honestly about the past, about her family, about the pressure she felt to maintain a certain image. I know my mother can be difficult, she admitted. She puts a lot of emphasis on appearances, on status. I grew up thinking those things mattered more than they do. You have taught me something different. What is that? I asked. That real strength is not about money or status. It is about perseverance, about sacrifice, about doing what is right even when it is hard. You have that strength. I want to learn from you. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Then I will teach you. It was not perfect. There were still awkward moments, still times when old patterns would resurface, but we were trying, all of us. I never gave the $300,000 back to Brandon's company. I had made my point, and he had learned his lesson. He did not ask me to reinvest either, which told me he understood. He needed to build his success on his own terms now, without his mother's hidden support. But I did set up a trust fund for Tyler. When he turns 25, he will receive a significant sum of money. Not so much that he will never have to work, but enough to give him security to help him start his life. And unlike what I did with Brandon, this fund comes with a letter explaining where the money came from, explaining his grandmother's story, explaining the value of hard work and sacrifice. I want Tyler to know his history. I want him to understand that his family is not defined by wealth or status, but by love and resilience, and the choices we make every day to show up for each other. As I sit here now, looking back on everything that happened, I realize that day at the birthday party was a turning point, not just for Brandon and me, but for all of us. It forced everyone to confront uncomfortable truths, to examine what really mattered. Yes, I could have handled it differently. I could have walked away from that gate, gone back to Columbus, and cut them out of my life entirely. Some people might say that would have been more dignified, less dramatic. But I do not regret what I did. Not for a second. Because sometimes love requires us to be uncomfortable. Sometimes it requires us to stand up for ourselves, to demand the respect we deserve. Sometimes it requires us to make hard choices that hurt in the moment, but lead to healing in the long run. I think about that security guard telling me the party was for close family only. I think about how much those words hurt, how small they made me feel. But I also think about what happened after. About sitting on the grass with Tyler, showing him pictures of his grandfather, telling him stories he had never heard. About Brandon breaking down and finally admitting his mistakes. About Stephanie beginning to understand what really matters in life. That pain led to something better. That rejection forced a reckoning that needed to happen. I am not invisible anymore. My son knows my worth now. My grandson knows his grandmother. And I know my own strength. The money did not define me. It never did. I could have told Brandon about my wealth years ago, could have used it to demand respect or attention. But that is not who I am. I wanted to be valued for who I was, not what I had. And in the end, that is exactly what happened. Now when Brandon introduces me to people, he does not hesitate. He does not look embarrassed. He says, "This is my mother. She raised me by herself. She is the strongest person I know." And he means it. Tyler calls me every week now, just to talk. He tells me about his day, asks me questions about when his dad was little, shares his dreams and worries. I am his grandmother in every real sense of the word. And me, I am learning to accept love again, to trust that I matter to these people, not because of what I can give them, but because of who I am. It is a slow process, rebuilding trust, that was broken. But it is happening. I still live in my modest house in Columbus. I still drive my old Honda. I still dress simply and live within my means. Because that is who I am. The money in my bank account does not change that. It does not make me better or worse than anyone else, but now I use that money differently. I donate to charities that help single mothers. I fund scholarships for kids who cannot afford college. I help where I can quietly and without fanfare because I remember what it was like to struggle. And when Tyler visits me in Columbus, which he does now several times a year, I show him where his father grew up. I take him to the apartment building where we lived, to the park, where Brandon learned to ride his bike, to the diner where I worked night shifts. I show him the whole truth of our story, the messy and beautiful reality of it. He listens with wide eyes, asking questions, trying to understand. And I know that these lessons will stay with him, that he will grow up understanding that worth is not measured in dollars, that family is not defined by status, that love sometimes means sacrifice and always means showing up. That phone call I made from my car, sitting outside those gates, changed everything. It was not an act of revenge, though I am sure some people saw it that way. It was an act of self-respect. It was me saying, I matter, my sacrifices matter, I will not be erased. And in doing so, I taught my son the most important lesson of all, that you cannot build a meaningful life by forgetting where you came from, that success without integrity is hollow, that family, real family, is about more than appearances or convenience. It is about showing up even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. So if you are watching this and you have ever felt invisible, ever felt like your sacrifices were not appreciated, ever felt like you had to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's life, I want you to know something. You do not. You are worth more than that. Stand up for yourself. Speak your truth. Make that phone call. Because in the end, the people who truly love you will rise to meet you. And the ones who do not, well, you deserve better than them anyway. Where are you watching from? Have you ever felt undervalued by family? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to stand up for yourself? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories and share this with anyone who needs to hear it. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brings you courage, peace, and the reminder that your worth is not determined by anyone else. You are enough exactly as you are. Take care of yourselves and remember that sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most beautiful transformation.